Hey everyone, welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video, revisiting one of my favorite rifles in the game, the SA-58, and taking a look at some of the changes and new builds for the rifle after the rebalancing in the 12.9 patch. The SA-58 is and has been one of the more popular weapons in Tarkov, maybe not as ubiquitous as the M4, HK, or Vector, but many players really appreciate the power of a full auto 7.62 rifle with big mags so you can dish out a lot of punishment. In the 12.9 patch, it did receive somewhat of a nerf, specifically to the overall ergonomics, which got lowered significantly. This makes it really hard to use with suppressors and drum mags, but we'll get to that a little later. Initially, I thought they gutted the recoil builds as well, but you just have to build it differently now with more expensive attachments if you want to hit that 66 recoil number. For this video, I'm going to approach it a bit differently. Instead of a budget, mid, and meta build, I'm going to focus on two setups, a low recoil build and a high ergonomics build, and give a few different options for each. The reason behind this is that there's really no compelling budget build for the SA-58. You pretty much go all the way with the modding or you use it from stock with just a sight. There isn't really much of an in-between build that's really worth the money. So with that intro out of the way, let's take a look at the new lowest recoil SA-58 build for the 12.9 patch. To start this build, I'm going to begin with the muzzle device because this is one of the more important parts for a low recoil build. The best in slot combo here, and the one that I honestly recommend, starts with the Lantac direct thread adapter combined with the Lantac blast mitigation device. Then you can add the Lantac dragon compensator as well, and all three parts combine to give you minus 24% recoil, but at the cost of some pretty intense muzzle flash. In my opinion, this is overall the best setup to use, simply because of the low ergonomics on the SA-58. With a suppressor, you can easily lower your ergonomics to below 10 or even to 0 if you also use a drum mag. If you want to use a suppressor, the two best options for recoil are the Blackout 51T flash hider plus the SDN6 suppressor, or the Thunderbeast 30 caliber muzzle brake and the Ultra 5 suppressor. These are both very expensive since they're the new meta suppressors and they really hurt your ergonomics. But if you want to use the SA-58 suppressed, those are the two best options. Moving on, the best handguard for this build is the VLTOR CASV FAL handguard, sold by Mechanic level 4. This takes special CASV rails sold at the same level, so pick those up as well. The grip for a pure recoil build is the Zenit RK2 foregrip, which still has the highest recoil reduction in game currently, but has a small ergonomics penalty. I also add an X400 flashlight to my builds, and to save having to repeat myself so much, I'll be including this price for every build I show in the video. I'll also be doing the same thing with this EOTech Holo sight, which I'll be using as the optic and including in the price of each build, so your price may vary a little bit depending on the scope that you choose. The sight is also mounted on the Extreme Duty dust cover, which is currently the only full rail for the SA-58 sold by Mechanic level 3. I would also kind of recommend trying out the LaRue Tactical Picatinny riser to get your sight up a little higher to avoid the muzzle flash. For the pistol grip, you want to go with the Fab AG FAL pistol grip from Mechanic, which is the best overall and not that expensive. The last parts on the build are the stock, and this is where you have a lot of viable choices for the SA-58, each with a different reason to choose them. First, the purely recoil focused setup starts with the SA-58 buffer tube adapter, and then you add the Mesa Tactical buffer tube, a fairly expensive and specialized part from Peacekeeper level 4. Then you add the Magpul PRS Gen 3 stock, which now has the best recoil stats in the game. It's a pretty expensive pair of parts, but with this setup you get 66 recoil, but at the price of falling all the way down to 17 ergonomics, which is not exactly ideal. This setup right here will run you approximately 230,000 rubles, depending on the flea market price for the SA-58. For a more balanced approach, I like to swap the foregrip over to the Fortis shift grip to bump up the ergonomics quite a lot for only minus 2 recoil. Then I also swap the PRS Gen 3 stock out for the MOE carbine stock plus the rubber butt pad attachment, which is only minus 1 total recoil but gains a lot of ergonomics. This setup gets you 77 recoil and 36 ergonomics, which is still low, but it's a lot better than 17, and it saves you about 15,000 rubles overall, coming in at about 215,000. Finally, the last option I'll give is a bit more of a budget approach, saving another 20 to 25,000 rubles off the price tag. For this one, just swap the foregrip over to the RK1, which is good for recoil and has a small ergonomics bonus as well. Next, swap the stock out for the SA-58 BRS stock, which is only about 18,000 rubles total from Mechanic level 3. With this setup, you end up with 77 recoil and 31 ergonomics, for about 195,000 rubles total. I think all three of these setups are pretty viable for different reasons, so pick your poison and let me know what you think. For the next section of this video, I'm going to look at the high ergonomics builds for the SA-58, which might be useful to anyone trying to set up the SA-58 as more of a DMR, or for anyone who just wants snappier aim down sight speed with this thing. In the 12.9 patch, it's harder overall to get a good combo of low recoil and high ergonomics on bigger rifles, which means you'll be sacrificing quite a bit of recoil stats for more ergonomics. That being said, these builds aren't aiming for the highest possible number on the ergonomics stats, but trying to find a middle ground with okay recoil and higher ergonomics. The overall core of this first build is the same as the recoil setup, with the Lantac muzzle combo, the VL-Tor CASV handguard, extreme duty dust cover, and the Fab AG pistol grip. So I won't spend a bunch of time repeating those for this first build. For the first option, you basically just take the recoil build from the previous section and swap the foregrip out for the Fortis shift grip. Next, you swap the stock over to the Magpul PRS-2 FAL stock, a unique part for the SA-58 with massive ergonomics gains. This build is still recoil focused, ending up with 91 recoil and 46 ergonomics when loaded up with a magazine, for about 190,000 rubles total. It's definitely higher recoil compared to the previous setups, but it's not that dramatic, and the extra 10 to 15 ergonomics points really helps if you're using a magnified scope. For the second option, we're going for a more purely ergonomics focused setup. First, you need to swap the barrel out for the 16-inch SA-58 barrel at mechanic level 3, and then sell the old one back. Next, you actually need a different handguard, the CASV FAS handguard instead of the FAL handguard, which still takes the same rails. For the grip, I'm sticking with the Fortis shift grip for maximum ergonomics, and I'm also sticking with the PRS-2 FAL stock for the same reason. With this setup, you end up with 112 recoil, but make a pretty big jump to around 60 ergonomics, depending on the other attachments like your sight and laser. The cost is also about the same at around 190,000 rubles total. This setup is actually able to ADS for much longer compared to other builds, but at the expense of a lot of recoil points. Finally, the last suggestion I have for this ergonomics setup is a simple swap out from the PRS-2 stock, starting with the SA-58 buffer tube adapter. Next, I buy the SI advanced buffer tube, which has much better ergonomic stat compared to the Mesa tactical buffer tube from earlier. Then for the stock itself, I use the MOE carbine stock plus the rubber butt pad, which altogether is about the same price as the PRS-2 stock, so the cost doesn't really change. With this setup, you get 102 recoil and about 54 ergonomics, so it's kind of a middle ground setup. I think that overall the SA-58 is better off these days if you just build it into a low recoil cannon, throw on a reflex sight, and spam shots at people. But these ergonomics builds are kind of interesting, especially if you swap over to a magnified scope and treat it more like a DMR with full auto hipfire capabilities. Well, that pretty much covers it for these SA-58 builds. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and after watching it, have a pretty good understanding of what the best attachments for the SA-58 are. I really overestimated the nerfs to the SA-58 at first in the 12.9 patch, and it does really kind of suck that suppressors are almost a no-go on it because of how harsh the ergonomics penalties are. It still hits like a freight train though, and it has good magazine options for hectic close range fights. So after revisiting it, I can safely say that it's still a pretty solid choice, and it drops anything that you hit it with quickly and cleanly. In any case, let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord channel, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.